I want you to understand something very simple that most people do not really understand until they have lived through it. Wealth does not grow in a straight line. It grows slowly, then faster, then suddenly. And that sudden part is what most people see from the outside. They see a person who appears to be getting richer very quickly, and they assume that person became lucky, or found a secret, or had some unfair advantage. But in many cases, what they are really seeing is the late stage of a compounding process that began years earlier, when nothing seemed to be happening. This is why the first $100,000 matters so much. It is not because $100,000 makes you rich. It does not. It is not enough to retire on. It is not enough to stop working. It is not enough to protect you from every risk in life. But it is enough to change the machine. Before that point, after that point, more and more of the work begins to be done by your money. That is the shift. And if you do not understand that shift, you may quit too early. You may look at your progress in the first few years and think nothing is happening. You may think the system is broken. You may think investing is too slow. You may think saving is pointless. But the early stage of compounding always feels disappointing. That is not a failure of the process. That is the nature of the process. Let me show it in the simplest possible way. Imagine I give you a choice. I can give you $1 million today, or I can give you 1 penny today, and that penny will double every day for 30 days. Most people, if they do not understand compounding, will take the $1 million. It feels obvious. 1 penny feels ridiculous. On the first day, you have 1 penny. On the second day, you have 2 pennies. On the third day, 4 pennies. On the fourth day, 8 pennies. For the first 10 days, the process looks almost stupid. You do not feel rich. You do not feel powerful. You do not feel like something historic is happening. At the end of 10 days, you have only a few dollars. That is how the early years of saving and investing feel. You are working, you are cutting expenses, you are saying no to things. You are trying to invest small amounts of money. And the statement does not look impressive. The gains look tiny. The whole thing feels slow and almost unfair. Then the process begins to change. The next 10 days become more interesting. The numbers are still not life-changing, but they start to become visible. The growth is no longer invisible. It begins to show up. Then the final 10 days are completely different. That same process that looked useless in the beginning becomes explosive at the end. By day 28, the penny path has crossed more than $1 million. By day 30, it has become more than $5 million. Nothing magical happened on day 28. The same rule was operating the whole time. The only thing that changed was the size of the base. That is the key to understanding why net worth begins to accelerate after $100,000. Getting to $100,000 is like getting to the part of the penny example where the numbers finally start to matter. The early stage is slow, the middle stage begins to work. The later stage can become powerful. Most people never get to the part where the process becomes powerful because they judge the process too early. They look at day 5 and conclude that day 30 will never arrive. They save a little money, invest a little money, watch it grow by a small amount, and decide it is not worth the sacrifice. That is a costly mistake in life and markets. The first part of the process often looks nothing like the final result. The seed does not look like the tree. The early deposit does not look like financial freedom. The first dividend does not look like independence. The first year of investing does not look like wealth, but the system is already changing. I have learned to think in systems, not events. An event is what happens today. A system is the process that produces outcomes over time. If you focus only on the event, you will get emotional. If you focus on the system, you can become rational. Compounding is a system at the beginning. Your labor is the engine. You earn the money, you save the money, you invest the money, you do not yet have enough capital for the capital to do much for you. That is why the first $100,000 is so hard. It comes mostly from your effort, it comes from your income, it comes from your savings rate. It comes from your discipline, it comes from your ability to avoid waste, it comes from your ability to delay gratification, it comes from your willingness to do boring things while other people are trying to look rich. The painful truth is that before you have meaningful capital, your money is not doing much yet. It helps, but it is not yet the main force you are. That is why this stage feels unfair. If you have $10,000 invested and you earn 10%, you make $1,000. That is good, but it does not change your life. It may not even feel worth the effort. If you have $100,000 invested and you earn 10%, you make $10,000. That is different. That is a month of income for some people. That is an emergency fund for others. That is the cost of major flexibility. If you have $1 million invested and you earn 10%, you make $100,000. Now the machine is doing what used to require a job. The return rate may be the same, but the outcome is completely different because the capital base is different. This is why rich people often appear to have an unfair advantage. They do. Capital is an advantage when you have money. Your money can make money. When you do not have money, your body and your time have to make most of the money. That is a harder game. It is not morally better or worse. It is simply structurally harder. The goal is to move from the hard game to the easier game. You do that by building the first meaningful pile of capital. For most people, that first meaningful pile is $100,000. Let me put the process into simple numbers. Suppose you are able to save and invest Suppose your money earns 10% a year. I am using round numbers because the exact numbers matter less than the pattern. In your first year, you save $10,000. At the end of that year, you have $10,000. In the second year, that $10,000 earns money, and you also save another $10,000. Now you have more than $20,000. In the third year, the same thing happens again. You have more money earning money, and you add more savings. The process continues. At first, it still feels slow. You may be doing the right thing and still not feel rewarded. That is because the first $100,000 is mostly built by your own contributions. In this example, it may take around 8 years to reach the first $100,000. That feels long. Then something important happens. The next $100,000 may take roughly 4 years. Then the time continues to compress. Eventually, the portfolio can grow by $100,000 in a year. Later, it can grow by $100,000 in less than a year. The machine begins producing the same result that once required many years of discipline. That is what people mean when they say net worth explodes. It does not explode because the universe suddenly becomes generous. It explodes because the compounding base has become large enough that the returns themselves become meaningful. When you are early, your savings matter more than your returns. When you are later, your returns begin to matter more and more. This is a very important distinction. People with small portfolios often obsess over returns. They ask, how can I get 20%? How can I find the next big stock? How can I double my money fast? But if your portfolio is small, the biggest lever is usually not the return. The biggest lever is how much you can add if you have $5,000. Earning 10% gives you $500. Earning 20% gives you $1,000. The difference is $500. That matters, but it is not the main game. If you can save an extra $5,000, you have changed the base far more than a few percentage points of return would have changed it. This is why the early stage is not about being clever. It is about being consistent. It is about building income. It is about controlling spending. It is about saving aggressively. It is about not letting lifestyle inflation consume every raise. It is about getting the capital base large enough for returns to become meaningful. People do not like this because it is not exciting. They want the exciting part first. They want the day 30-penny result without living through days 1 through 20. They want the portfolio to produce large gains before the portfolio is large enough to do that. That is not how reality works. Reality works through cause and effect. If you get the compounding, if you do not build the base, you do not get the compounding. It is not a matter of hope. It is a matter of mechanics. There is a principle here that is useful in many areas of life. The pain comes before the acceleration. In physical training, the early workouts are uncomfortable and the visible change is small. In learning, the early effort feels confusing and the progress feels slow. In business, the early years often feel like pushing a heavy wheel that barely moves. In investing, the early savings feel too small to matter. But if the system is sound, the progress builds beneath the surface. Then one day, the outside world notices. They call it sudden. But it was not sudden. It was delayed. This is why I would tell anyone who is below $100,000 in net worth to treat the first $100,000 as a serious mission. Not because money is everything, it is not. Money is a tool. It gives you optionality. It gives you resilience. It gives you the ability to think clearly. It reduces the probability that one bad event ruins your life. It gives you more freedom to make good decisions. But the first $100,000 is the point where the tool starts becoming powerful. Before that, you are mostly protecting yourself and building the base. After that, you are still working, still saving, still making decisions, but the process has another force behind it. Your capital begins contributing in a noticeable way. This is why delaying the first $100,000 is costly. If you delay that milestone, you are not only delaying, you are delaying the start of the acceleration phase. Every year you delay building the base is a year when compounding cannot fully work for you. Most people understand that they should save money, but they underestimate the cost of waiting. Waiting is not neutral. Waiting has a price. The price is the lost compounding on the base you failed to build. This is why the problem must be faced directly. How do you actually get to $100,000 for most people? It will not happen in 1 year. It will not happen through one lucky trade. It will not happen because of motivation for 3 days. It will happen through a system. The first thing to understand is that the majority of the first $100,000 will usually come from money you earned and saved. That is the part people do not want to hear. In the early stage, the real estate is not going to save you. Crypto is not going to save you. A magic investment is not going to save you. Your behavior will save you. Your savings rate will save you. Your ability to increase your income will save you. Your ability to keep money will save you. This is where many people fail. They want the compounding without the contribution. They want the explosion without the grind. They want the reward without first building the base that makes the reward possible. The first $100,000 requires discipline. You need to live within your means. That phrase is old, but it is still true. If you spend everything you earn, you cannot build capital. If you cannot build capital, you cannot compound. If you cannot compound, you stay dependent on your labor forever. This does not mean you must live miserably, but it does mean you must make choices. Every dollar has a job. Some dollars buy current comfort. Some dollars buy future freedom. If every dollar goes to current comfort, future freedom does not get funded. That is the trade-off. And because the first $100,000 is mostly created by your savings, the small decisions matter more than people think. The subscriptions matter. The unnecessary car payment matters. The delivery food matters. The impulse purchases matter. The status purchases matter. The habit of spending because other people are spending matters. I am not saying this because the path to wealth is only about cutting small expenses. It is not. But in the early stage, leakage is dangerous. A small leak can keep the bucket from filling, and if the bucket never fills, the machine never begins to work. You must reduce the leakage, but you must not make the mistake of thinking that cutting expenses is the only lever. There are two sides to the equation. You spend less than you make. That means spending matters. But income matters too. Many people focus so much on cutting that they forget to grow. There are only so many expenses you can cut. You can only reduce your food bill so far. You can only reduce your housing costs so far. You can only cancel so many things. At some point, the bigger lever is income. This is especially true when the cost of living is high. If rent, food, insurance, transportation, and basic needs consume most of your income, there may not be much left to cut without making life unstable. So you need to think about how to increase your earning power. That may mean improving your skills. It may mean changing jobs. It may mean negotiating. It may mean building a side income. It may mean learning a higher value activity. It may mean going where opportunity is better. It may mean doing the hard thing that your current self does not want to do, but your future self will be grateful you did. I think of income like water flowing into a reservoir. I think of spending like water flowing out, and I think of investing as the reservoir turning into a productive machine. If too little water flows in or too much water flows out, the reservoir never fills. If the reservoir never fills, you never get power. So the first objective is simple. Increase the inflow, control the outflow, invest the difference. That is not a slogan. That is the machine. Once you understand the machine, the next question is where to put the money. I would keep the early investing process simple. Many people complicate investing but complexity can be a disguise for confusion. In many cases, simple systems executed consistently beat complicated systems executed emotionally. If I were trying to build my first $100,000, I would look for every structural advantage available. If an employer offers a retirement plan match, I would want to understand it and take advantage of it if it fits my circumstances. A match is not normal investment return. It is an immediate boost created by the structure of the plan. I would use tax-advantaged accounts where appropriate. Retirement accounts can help the money grow more efficiently because taxes matter over long periods of time. I would keep the investment approach simple, using broad funds rather than trying to prove I am smarter than the market every week. Index funds, ETFs, or diversified funds can allow a person to participate in the growth of many businesses without having to correctly predict which single company will win. The purpose of the first stage is not to impress people. The purpose is to build the base. And the base should not depend on brilliance. It should depend on a process that can be repeated. I would also automate as much as possible. When money is invested automatically from each paycheck, the decision is removed from emotion. You do not have to wake up every month and decide whether you feel like building wealth. The system does it for you. This matters because humans are emotional. We get excited near tops, we get afraid near bottoms, we overspend when life feels good, we freeze when life feels uncertain. A good system protects you from your lower quality impulses. It makes the right behavior easier and the wrong behavior harder. The earlier you start, the more powerful the system becomes. The early phase may feel slow, but it is not wasted time. It is laying the track. The money you invest at the beginning has the longest time to compound. It may look small, but it is working for the longest period. That is why starting early matters so much. Even if the amount is small, starting early helps you pass through the boring phase sooner. People often wait because the amount they can invest feels too small. They think, what difference will $100 make? But the act of starting changes the system. It builds the identity, it builds the habit, it builds the base. It gives compounding time to work. Small beginnings are not the enemy. No beginning is the enemy. There is another path that some people use to build net worth, and that is home ownership. It is not right for everyone at every time, and it should not be romanticized. A house can be an asset, but it can also become a burden if bought badly, financed badly, or bought in the wrong life situation. But the source idea is important. If you are in an area where you want to stay, and if the math works, and if you can handle the responsibilities, buying a home can allow you to use leverage and inflation in your favor. Let me explain the principle. If you save $40,000 and use it as a down payment on a $400,000 home, you control an asset much larger than the cash you put down. If the value of the home rises by 10%, the home rises by $40,000. That does not mean housing always goes up. It does not mean you should buy recklessly. It does not mean leverage is safe. Leverage increases both upside and risk, but it does show why ownership of an asset can accelerate net worth when the structure is sound. Inflation can be painful when you are only holding cash and earning wages that do not keep up. But inflation can help certain borrowers who own real assets with fixed-rate debt, because the debt is paid back in dollars that may become less valuable over time, while the asset and income may rise in nominal terms. Again, this is not magic, it is structure. The problem is that people often use leverage emotionally instead of structurally. They buy too much house, they underestimate maintenance, they ignore taxes and insurance, they assume appreciation, they stretch themselves until they have no margin of safety. That is not wise. The right question is not, can I technically buy this? The right question is, does this improve my long-term system without making me fragile? Fragility matters. If your plan only works when nothing goes wrong, it is not a plan, it is a hope. So if you are saving for a home, I would think carefully about where that down payment money sits. Money needed in the short term should not be exposed to the same volatility as long-term investment money. A high-yield savings account or similarly conservative place can make sense for money that must be protected and available. The point is not to chase maximum return with short-term money. The point is to keep the money safe enough for its purpose while still being thoughtful about yield and institution quality. You must also be careful where you keep your cash. A financial institution is a counterparty. Reputation matters, safety matters, access matters, yield matters, but yield alone should not be the only factor. A slightly higher rate at a questionable institution is not always a better deal. This brings us back to the main principle. You are trying to build the first $100,000 as quickly and intelligently as possible. There are usually two broad engines. One engine is investing in financial assets, preferably in a simple, consistent, tax-aware way. The other engine, for some people, is saving toward ownership of a real asset such as a home, when the life situation and math make sense. Both engines require discipline. Both require not spending every dollar. Both require avoiding mistakes that can set you back years. And both require understanding that the early stage is supposed to feel slow. Most people make the early stage harder because they compare themselves to people in later stages. They look at someone with $1 million compounding and compare it to their own first $5,000. That comparison creates discouragement. Do not compare your day 5 to someone else's day 28. That is not rational. The correct comparison is between your current system and your previous system. Are you saving more? Are you earning more? Are you investing consistently? Are you reducing waste? Are you building resilience? Are you getting closer to the point where your money begins working for you? That is the right comparison. The first $100,000 is partly a financial milestone and partly a psychological one. When you reach it, you prove to yourself that you can build capital. You prove that you can control your behavior. You prove that you can delay gratification. You prove that you can operate a system long enough for the system to produce results. That identity is very valuable. People who see themselves as consumers behave one way. People who see themselves as capital builders behave another way. Consumers ask, what can this money buy me right now? Capital builders ask, what can this money become if I put it to work? That one difference compounds across a lifetime. The world is full of pressure to remain a consumer. Advertisements want your money. Social media wants you to compare. Friends may want you to spend. Status games want you to prove you are doing well before you have actually built anything. If you give in to all of that, you may look successful while remaining fragile. A person can drive a nice car and have no net worth. A person can live in a beautiful apartment and have no assets. A person can earn a high income and still be trapped because every dollar is already committed to lifestyle. Income is not wealth. Wealth is what you keep, what you own, and what can support you when you are not actively working. The first $100,000 teaches that lesson in a concrete way. It forces you to become a person who keeps money. And keeping money is one of the most underrated financial skills. Many people can earn money, far fewer can keep it. Fewer still can put it into a system that grows. That is the progression: earn it, keep it, invest it. Let it compound. Protect the system, repeat. There is no need to make this more complicated than it is. That does not mean it is easy. Simple and easy are not the same. The process is simple. The execution is hard because it requires you to fight human nature. Human nature wants comfort now. Human nature wants status now. Human nature wants certainty now. Human nature wants to stop when the reward is not visible. Compounding rewards the opposite behavior. It rewards patience, it rewards consistency, it rewards deferred gratification, it rewards people who can keep doing the right thing before the world applauds them for it. That is why the first $100,000 is the test. It tests whether you can keep moving when the external reward is small. It tests whether you can build before anyone notices. It tests whether you can stay rational when progress feels slow. And if you pass that test, the next stage becomes different. Not effortless, different. After $100,000, a 10% year is $10,000. If you continue to add money, the growth accelerates. The combination of contributions, the system begins to feel alive. Then the next $100,000 comes faster. Then the next. And eventually you may look back and realize that the hardest part was not the math. The math was always available. The hardest part was becoming the person who could follow the math long enough for the math to matter. That is the real secret. Trust the math. But do not only trust the math, build the behavior that allows the math to work. Because compounding does not help the person who interrupts it every time life becomes uncomfortable. It does not help the person who sells every time markets fall. It does not help the person who spends every raise. It does not help the person who borrows against the future to look successful in the present. Compounding helps the person who stays in the game. So the practical message is direct. If your net worth is below $100,000, do not be ashamed. That is where many people begin. But do not be casual about it either. Treat the first $100,000 as an urgent but disciplined objective. Save aggressively where you can. Increase your income where you can. Invest consistently. Use retirement accounts and tax advantages intelligently. Keep the strategy simple enough that you can actually follow it. Avoid debt that consumes your cash flow. Avoid status traps. Avoid waiting for perfect conditions. And understand that the boring phase is not a sign that you are failing. It is the required beginning of the compounding curve. If you keep doing this, the day will come when your money begins to produce numbers that once seemed impossible. The first $100,000 may feel like dragging a heavy stone uphill. But after that, gravity begins to change. The stone does not become weightless, but it begins to roll with you instead of only against you. That is when people from the outside may say, "You got lucky." They will not see the years when nothing seemed to be happening. They will not see the expenses you refused. They will not see the extra income you pursued. They will not see the boring deposits. They will not see the discipline. They will see the acceleration. That is fine. You do not need them to understand the process. You need to understand it, because once you understand it, you stop treating money like something that only pays bills. You begin treating it like a system of stored energy. If you waste it, the energy disappears. If you preserve it and invest it intelligently, it can begin producing more energy. That is what wealth is. It is stored economic energy that gives you options. And options are one of the most valuable things in life. Options allow you to leave a bad job. Options allow you to handle an emergency. Options allow you to invest when others are afraid. Options allow you to wait for the right opportunity. Options allow you to make decisions from principles instead of panic. The first $100,000 creates more options than most people realize, not because it solves everything, but because it changes your position. You move from always being acted upon by circumstances to beginning to act with some degree of control. That is the beginning of. It does not look dramatic at first. It looks like saving $10, then $100, then $1,000. It looks like not buying something you could technically afford because you want something bigger than the thing. It looks like investing when the amount feels small. It looks like learning skills that increase your income. It looks like choosing a system over an impulse. It looks like doing boring things for a long time. Then, it looks like acceleration. That is why I would say the first $100,000 is not just a money goal. It is a life structure goal. Build that structure, protect it. And once it starts working, do not interrupt it just because the world becomes noisy. Markets will rise and fall. Inflation will change. Interest rates will change. The economy will move through cycles. Other people will get excited and afraid, but the principle remains: build the base. Let the base compound, keep adding to it. Do not destroy it with bad behavior. Understand that the early stage is the hardest stage. And remember that the explosion comes after the base is large enough, not before. That is how people get wealthy, not instantly, not magically, but mechanically. The mathematics are not complicated. The hard part is respecting them before they become impressive. So if you are still in the slow part, do not confuse slowness with failure. You may simply be in the part of the curve where the system is quietly preparing to work. Keep going. The first $100,000 is hard. But once you cross it, the machine begins to change. And if you build the machine properly, it can work for you for the rest of your life.